wasn't long ago that you could stop by Target for a tuck-friendly swimsuit and the kids could check out adult material in the elementary school library, all while their parents spent the afternoon apologizing to black people on the street for slavery. But then Trump came along and ruined the progressive party we call wokeness, as it's been moved to the cultural gas stove's back burner. It had a good run, though. We can trace wokeness back to MLK when he spoke of remaining awake during a great revolution. The term started with good intentions, which meant to be aware of social issues during the civil rights era. Eventually, federal and state governments and employers wrote it into law and policy. The concept evolved into political correctness, then social justice, before graduating to the modern wokeness we have today. By the early 2020s, wokeness burned black hot, throughout society. It was all over social media, in work emails, and the focus of many politicians' agendas. But people grew tired of walking on eggshells. More relevant to for-profit businesses, consumers grew tired, which led to some of the most significant boycotts in American history, with Bud Light and Target taking the brunt. And they worked. Big brands like Walmart, Starbucks, JP Morgan, and Ford agreed to scale back DEI initiatives and rethink their marketing plans. But it's not just gender ideology and race. People are fed up with the defund the police movement, support for open borders, and climate change activism. That's why so many people have declared the war on wokeness as won. But has wokeness been defeated, or is it just tactically retreating to fight another day? Thanks so much for stopping by NPC Overrider, where we challenge mainstream source code to develop independent thought, one user story at a time. Let's crack open an ice cold Bud Light and check out the latest programming. Okay, let's take a look at the mainstream argument that says wokeness is no more.
The election was decided based on how people felt about wokeness. And they were like, we're going too far in that direction. So now that that's been solved, we don't need to argue about it anymore. Like, we already know how America feels. You can say whatever you want about wokeness. Like, you can be critical of it because nobody's going to give you pushback because the majority of the country said we don't believe in that anymore.
Point number 5, Trump train. Trump is back and he's pissed. On the 47th first day in office, he signed an executive order to crack down on equity-based practices in government, placing all federal DEI-related positions on leave. Since then, U.S. military recruitment numbers have skyrocketed after years of dismal numbers. Also, on April 3rd, Trump demanded that all states confirm that their K-12 schools don't engage in DEI practices or they risk losing their federal funding. With such programs effectively illegal, wokeness has lost its institutional grip. Point 4, state legislation. It's not just the Trump administration waging war on wokeness. In 2024, Governor Bill Lee of Tennessee signed the Dismantle DEI Act, which restricted government, public colleges, and schools from using race, sex, or other demographics in employment decisions. In January, West Virginia Governor Patrick Morrisey issued an executive order eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion in state government. So far this year, 9 states have eliminated DEI policies, with 9 more having similar legislation through at least one chamber. Wokeness is going to have a hard time surviving this multi-pronged assault from the federal and state governments. Point 3, corporate retreat has a new meaning. Corporate giants like Meta and Boeing agreed to scale back DEI programs, but the right-wing boycotts rippled throughout the marketplace, impacting medium-sized to smaller brands as well. Journalist Robbie Starbuck made a name for himself by seeking out companies with political agendas, especially those that mainly catered to right-wing customers such as Tractor Supply, John Deere, and Harley Davidson. Cultural corporate messaging strongly reinforced federal and state mandated DEI. Without it, wokeness as a concept will continue to lose steam. Point 2, box office bloodbath. Maybe the best way to quantitatively illustrate the political divide between everyday Americans and political or cultural elites in this country is to take a look at the ticket sales over the last few years. For example, in 2021, Santa Inc., Sarah Silverman and Seth Rogen's HBO Christmas special about a girl becoming Santa Claus currently sits at a 1.7 star rating out of 15,000 reviews on IMDb. More recently, in 2023, The Marvels crashed on opening weekend, raking in $47 million with a $220 million price tag, making only about $85 million in the US and Canada overall. The latest cinema slaughter was, of course, Snow White, where creators had to stop mid-production to revise their content, but it was a lost cause. With a $250 million budget, they made only about $87 million in the US and Canada. That film sits at about a 1.7 star rating out of 357,000 reviews. Point number 1, woke fatigue. Whether we're talking politics, corporations, or Hollywood, it all stems from the same source. Everyday people are simply tired. Voters voted out DEI, consumers voted with their dollars, and movie fans found something else to watch. All this signaled to state, federal, and workplace leaders people are tired of the thought and speech police threatening them at their every move. With such an overwhelming pushback, we can see across the board that wokeness is on life support. All right, some strong points there from the mainstream programming, but let's take a look at the rebuttal that says wokeness is alive and well.
Is wokeness really dead?
No, wokeness is not dead, and I don't think it ever will be if we're talking about a certain punitive stripe of wokeness. But the peak woke of 2020 and 2021, I feel confident in saying now that that has passed. That was a different time, and I think that it was caused by a combination of how horrible what happened to George Floyd was, the fact that around the time that that happened was when we were realizing that the lockdown was not going to end anytime soon. It was a beautiful spring. Everybody was bored, lonely, and had time to invest themselves in a cause. And I think that's what started the hyper wokeness. And I think that the media of Zoom encouraged it because it took people away from having physical presence with each other. But what there needed to be was a pushback. And I don't think of myself as winning, but I definitely went into a kind of bourbon fueled rage in the summer of 2020. And I thought, this must stop.
Point number 5, Democratic rebrand. The Trump administration in red states might enact legislation against DEI practices, but this simply pushes progressives back to the drawing board to reassess their public messaging. For example, Gavin Newsom boldly interviewed Charlie Kirk on his podcast, telling listeners that the California governor no longer supports transgender athletes competing in women's sports. Quite a surprise. Senator Alyssa Slotkin, Democrat from Michigan, expressed after President Trump's 2020 victory that the Democratic Party must rethink their public perception as being woke, as the term has transformed into a pejorative. As progressives historically use society's woes as a platform for policy, they'll simply shift gears, and wokeness will manifest as a different flavor. Point number 4, school support. Despite the threats to colleges to disband DEI, the University of New Mexico, for example, resisted with state support. In Boston, Northeastern University pulled a fast one and simply renamed its DEI office to Belonging at Northeastern, and it's not just colleges resisting. Public schools like those in Dayton, Ohio, unanimously voted against Trump's anti-DEI efforts. Point number 3, grassroots and community organizing. Woke supporters might tone it down a little bit in the limelight, but grassroots circles keep the progressive torch lit underground. Organizations like the Courage Collective, Equity in the Center, and Equity Lab continue to push for resistance against anti-woke policies through consulting services, website design, and community events. Resource-rich organizations like the American Civil Liberties Union, Brennan Center for Justice, or Southern Poverty Law Center continue to attack anti-DEI efforts in court by suing federal and state governments seeking to end progressive policies. Point 2, corporate cover. Despite right-wing boycotts and sales losses, giants like Marriott continue to embrace DEI policies, with CEO Anthony Capuano saying recently, "We welcome all to our hotels, and we create opportunities for all, and fundamentally those will never change." The words might change, but that's who we are as a company. Coca-Cola recently warned that abandoning DEI could be bad for business. Levi Strauss shareholders voted against ending diversity programs in April, and to nobody's surprise, Ben & Jerry's continues its strong public progressive stance, as co-founder Ben Cohen was recently tossed from a May 14th Senate hearing while protesting RFK Jr. Point number 1, Hollywood holdouts. Verna Myers, former head of inclusion at Netflix, told Variety magazine in March that entertainment companies will likely not abandon DEI initiatives, along with stars like Meryl Streep, Pedro Pascal, and Robert De Niro, who continued their political rants in public and online. De Niro, earlier this month, delivered an opening speech at the Cannes, I'm not sure which one it is, film festival, where he continued his anti-Trump rhetoric. Video game consultancy groups like Sweet Baby Inc. remain in gamers' crosshairs as producers continually push woke narratives. Earlier this year, Ubisoft released the game Assassin's Creed Shadows, which portrays a black samurai character and portrays same-sex romances in the storyline. So, is wokeness dead? What is wokeness, really? I mean, they say it means to have a heightened awareness of social inequalities and injustices, particularly as they relate to racial, sexual, or gender identification. But it's really just support for the current political agenda. I think most of us agree that if someone's being targeted because of their race, religion, or creed, there should be steps to address unequal treatment, be it violence on the streets or workplace discrimination. Yet our desire for equal rights has been molded into a political bludgeon. The same thing happened in China when the government pitted people against farmers and elites. The Soviet Union did something similar with the workforce, and Hitler gained support by blaming Germany's shortcomings on non-Aryans. None of these tyrants cared about their people. It was all about power and control. I don't think many of our modern politicians, CEOs, or celebrities give a rip about trans rights, racial equity or equality, or the climate. That said, there's many politicians with R's next to their names and country music stars that could care less about American values. You could call supporting the Iraq invasion 20 years ago woke if you ask me. Is wokeness really dead? Maybe the in-your-face punitive cultural variety we've seen over the past 10 or 20 years is fading, but politicians and people in power always have and always will play on cultural woes for votes, and that's something that will never die. Well, that's going to do it for this version of NPC Overrider. I'm your lead engineer, Greg. What do you think? Is wokeness dead? If you want to help me save the NPCs, please set the like button to true and open a ticket in the comments section if you have an idea for a future release. But for now, it's about Beer 30. Thanks so much for stopping by. Have a good one.